Hey, everybody. Welcome to Called Up the Prospects podcast. I'm Chris Peters from FloHockey, joined as always by Cam Robinson of Elite Prospects. Cam, how the heck are you today?
I'm doing well, buddy. I didn't ask. Did you guys end up going out after the game last night?
We did find a place to grab food because we're at the World Under-18
Nice.
Championship, for those that don't know. And so we are in a constant state of going to games and trying to find food. That's kind of what this whole process has been. There's a lot of games. We had the quarterfinals yesterday. We're recording this on Thursday, so it is before the semifinal and final. But I think we've got a lot that we can look at. We're going to talk about those guys today. But yes, it's also trying to find the spot to watch NHL playoff games as well. And boy, I'll tell you what, if you're in Frisco, Texas, there is no shortage of options. And we'll expect to be doing that once again this fine evening. So lots going on here, Cam. But yeah, we're going to talk a lot about the Under-18 World Championship today and how it relates to the NHL Draft. Also, we have the NHL Draft Lottery. So we will know who will have the number one pick in this draft class. And we will be talking about that just for a little bit as well and going to our normal segments like Beyond Belief. And you have to pick one. And we've got a lot to talk about there. But Cam, before we get started on this sojourn into the World Under-18 Championship, the NHL Draft, the NHL Draft Lottery, and all that, we want to remind you that Called Up the Prospects podcast is brought to you by wonderful Pistachios. Get snacking, get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Wonderful Pistachios. Pretty good. So anyway, we are going to talk first about the NHL Draft Lottery. That is top of mind because it is coming up on Monday. Just so everybody is aware, the San Jose Sharks have the best odds at getting the number one pick after getting Micheline Celebrini last year. Number 2 is Chicago. 3 is Nashville. 4 is Philadelphia. 5 Boston. 6 Seattle. 7 Buffalo in that order in terms of who can get the number one pick. So, Cam, I want to kick this thing off by starting with a tough question because of those teams that I just mentioned, is there one of them that could really use Matthew Schaefer? Or is maybe one of those teams better served maybe landing a little bit back, maybe getting one of these other guys? If you are looking at those 7 teams that I just talked about, which one of them do you think could see a number one pick having the largest impact at this point?
Man, I looking from it in a backward sense, I think Chicago needs him maybe the least because they already went out and kind of reached a little bit on Levshunov last year, passing up on the high forwards. I mean, San Jose, I think he would be just an excellent fit, Schaefer, that is, with San Jose. They do have Sam Dickinson. They do have some players in their pipeline, but like that, putting that with Micheline Celebrini and Will Smith, that excites me. That's an exciting combination. You know, Philly, gosh, any of these teams, right? Of course, Boston could use him too. Philly, but I'm gonna go with the Sharks. Now it will mean two wins in 2 years, and there goes their chance at getting Gavin McKenna next year. But we got to think they're taking a step forward after this.
Yeah, I do think they're taking a step forward as well, and I think that the hard part here is when you're looking at these teams. Obviously, San Jose just has won a lottery recently. Chicago has won a lottery recently. But then I look and I see what Nashville is. They're sitting there just lurking, and they have very rarely had a super high pick in the NHL draft. They have a number of veterans, and I wonder what if you put an influx of a player like a Matthew Schaefer, or I think any of the top picks are going to be able to make an impact within probably 2 years with Nashville. I don't know that anybody's going to come in and help them significantly next year. A team that really hasn't had that level of pick. So I'm excited to see exactly what that's all going to look like on Monday night when the lottery balls bounce. But, I think the other things too is, do we have a consensus yet on number 2? Now, I think that Michael Misa has probably got a significant amount of that attention to be the number 2 or possibly even contend for number 1. But he did not come to the World Under-18s. Got a little banged up in the playoffs. What do we think about, if we're looking at this and we don't know how the lottery balls are going to bounce, but is Michael Misa still, for you, the best option for whoever doesn't get Matthew Schaefer?
Yes, he will be second overall on most draft lists. I think there's going to be an incredible amount of variance on lists this year between teams. But I've been going around, I've been starting to get some data points here for another one of those executive and scout polls that I'll do, and talking about first overall. And so, Schaefer is still the overwhelming favorite among the people I'm talking to that they would take first overall. Michael Misa's right there with him. Everyone's saying it's Schaefer and Misa, and then kind of the rest. But that isn't to say that a team could land at number 2 and go outside of that. That isn't to say that Misa couldn't end up going first overall too, say if Chicago won the lottery. So there are going to be situations where that might change, but I do think at this point it's Schaefer and it's Misa. Then there's a little bridge, a little gap, and then we start talking about that next wave, the Martones, Hagens, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, a lot of these general managers that do have the high picks have been in Frisco at the Under-18 World Championship. I think a lot of them had eyes on Anton Frundell just to get their own eyes on them because they probably haven't seen him live before. And Frundell has not exactly lit it up here, but that is a name that I continue to hear in the same breath as Misa's among teams that are, potentially have opportunities to pick pretty high in this draft. We haven't seen it here with him particularly dialing it up yet, but I still think that he has a number of fans. I think the very interesting topic of Caleb Desnoyers, who will be probably the last prospect standing this year if we think Moncton is going to go on a run and possibly play in the Memorial Cup. So that's another factor to consider. But there's so much intrigue coming up here in these next couple of days. And the great thing is that with the draft lottery, things will start to kind of clear up. I think there's not a ton of consensus when it comes to this draft class. But as you start to see which teams are in there, you'll have a better idea for things like mock drafts and other things about how it might go. But boy, is it going to be an exciting night for some teams and a pretty crushing one for others. But I think, as you alluded to earlier, Cam, the year to be real bad is next year, because I think everybody wants a piece of Gavin McKenna, who just completed a sweep alongside his team, the Medicine Hat Tigers, in the WHL playoffs. They are going to play for a WHL championship for the first time since before he was born. So this is, he's only
53-game point streak. 53-game point streak. 134 points. Insanity. This kid is ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
and you want to be bad for him next year. And you want to be bad in 27 for DuPont. And then you're probably going to want to be bad in 28 for Maddox Schultz. We could just keep going down the list. Who's the best 2011?
Yeah. Which brings me to my next topic, because this draft, and I think the tournament that we're at right now, has been a real indicator of the way this 2025 draft is setting up, which is to say it's not the most exciting class of player. And you and I have been here. We've been watching hockey. This is my 10th live World Under-18 Championship. And I can say
that's a lot.
with fair certainty that this has been the weakest that I've seen in terms of the quality of play, the quality of teams. Now, we also have the qualifier that Russia's not here. That does change the dynamic. It means that more of the bigger teams will have one other game against a so-so opponent. So that is definitely a concern, where that's part of the dynamic here. But we sit here after, basically the entire preliminary round and the quarterfinal. We've seen maybe 2 decent games throughout the entire tournament. And one of them was just yesterday in the quarters, where Canada ousted Czechia in overtime. But yeah, right now, Canada and Slovakia will play in one semifinal. USA will play Sweden. Those are both rematches from the first round, because the tournament reseeds after the quarterfinals. And so we have those 2 matchups. But Cam, as we've watched this tournament, and we've talked about it all year, it's not the most exciting draft class. It's probably not all that deep. It just and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it kind of feels like this tournament is definitely showing, yeah, it's about what we said it was going to be.
Barbecue and blowouts, baby. That's come on down to Texas, and the barbecue's good. The blowouts are bad, but we're finding storylines. We're finding things that we can glean some information from. But yes, it has been, for the most part, difficult to become emotionally invested in this tournament. I said it last night to you. I'm longing for the last year's tournament where we had Gavin McKenna and James Haggins going head to head trying to break a record and win a gold medal. We had Porter Martone in his draft -1 putting up like 18 points himself, right? We had TJ Ginla. We had Cole Hudson doing his thing over there. We had like the Americans were so much stronger. The Canadians were so much stronger. The games were so much better. Yes, we didn't have the Swedes really pushing too much, and Consta Hellenius. Wait, no, that was the other. Yeah, was struggling. It was just it was a far better tournament, and we don't have those personalities, and we don't have that skill level, and we don't have that competitiveness. Even though, like you said, Canada-Czechia last night was a close game, right? Too close for comfort for Canada. Obviously, they should have been able to knock off that Czech team without needing extra time, but they got it done anyway. So at least we had that, and we will hopefully now in the semis. Now we've got a couple more days of action. Hopefully there are going to be some tight games. We're going to see the best players step up and really show their skill. And maybe we can have like a fun finish like we had last year.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. And this will come out on the day of the semifinals, and anything can really happen. But yeah, it's been tough. And I think the interesting thing is every single year there are records broken. And now we have another one this year where there's a record broken, and it's Sasha Boumediene for Sweden, setting the single tournament scoring record for defensemen, and he did it in the first 5 games of the tournament. So and it's not like he's been good, but he hasn't been amazing, and it's just one of those things where it's like in a different year that those numbers would be tough to put up. He had 6 points in the first game against Switzerland, which just got relegated, by the way. The Swiss are out of the top division. They lost in a shootout to Norway in the relegation game. It used to be best of 3. It's now best of 1. So you're one and done, and they are relegated for the first time since 2006. And they hosted this tournament 2 years ago. So there's just a lot of crazy things happening, but that was the team that Boumediene had a 6-point game. That was the second most points ever in a single game, tied for most by a defenseman. It's just kind of crazy how this has worked out here. But that being said, he does now have this record. And so I think we're going to talk a little bit about guys that have risen, have seen their stock rising and falling, and maybe some guys that have pushed their stock where they haven't really done much one way or the other. We're going to do that in just a second. But before that, like this tournament, it's been really interesting. Canada and USA have yet to lose in the event so far. So they've been the top 2 teams. Sweden's only loss was to USA. They've really looked dominant otherwise. They beat Finland pretty handily in their quarterfinal. But now we have Norway, which will be back next year. They actually have some legit players on their roster for next year as well. Nicholas Aram Olsen is going to be a guy that we're going to be talking about for 2026 in the NHL draft, as we are on a bit of a run for Norway these last couple of years. When you think of Michael Brandt Nygård and also
Solberg.
I don't know why I can't think of Solberg's name, because I just saw him play live a couple of weeks ago. But Stian Solberg, and so Norway's rocking as well. But yeah, a lot of things. It's been a tough watch, I think, for some of it. If you're looking for the top players, when some of the best players have been guys for 2026, which we'll get to a little bit later in the show. But I do want to give this a little more of almost a game show feel here as we go. We're gonna do a little bit of rapid fire here, Cam. And the way we're gonna do this is I'm gonna give. I've got a list of players that are draft eligible in 2025, and on that list of players is guys that are, some will be higher in the draft, some will probably be early day 2 picks, some of them might be later. But I figured just to give people an idea of what we've been seeing here, Cam, I'm going to give you a name. You're going to tell me whether they're rising, their stock is rising, their stock is falling, or if it's a push. And then we'll circle back and we're going to talk about these, and some I may agree with, some I may not. But I figure this is a good way to get this going here. And it was actually your suggestion, and I was like, yes, that sounds great. So let's do it this way. We're going to start at the top, and I think the guy that everybody was looking forward to getting here, he wins the Allsvenskan with Djurgården, hadn't played a lot in these last couple of games of the playoffs, but Anton Frundell arrives. So let me hear it. Anton Frundell, Team Sweden, rising, falling, or push?
Okay, before the buzzer starts and the countdown begins on this, I'd just like to say that I could say push for all of these players, just because we've been watching them for a year or 2 years, and it's like I shouldn't let. But I actually have a couple of good quotes in an article that's coming out tomorrow morning where an executive was saying that, yeah, players can make a difference at this event. So we're going to go with that, and we're going to judge it just based on these performances. So Anton Frundell, I'm going to say falling. I'm going to say just below a push, just because the expectations were high. We gave him a break in the American game, and he hasn't really done much. And some, like you said, some teams think he's a lottery pick. And so I'm going to say falling for Anton.
All right. So we go from Anton Frundell. We go to the big Czech defenseman. We talked about him a bit last week, Radim Mrtka. After that American game, a lot of us were, ooh, and then what happened? But Radim Mrtka, rising, falling, or push?
Falling. Been pretty mid. Been pretty underwhelming.
Let's go. Let's keep it on the defense side. Canada's Jackson Smith.
Falling, because I had much higher hopes as well. Doesn't look like a lottery pick. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, let's see if we can break the streak here. Maybe. I don't know. Rising or falling or push. Brady Martin of Team Canada.
I'm going to say rising. I'm going to say just ever so much. The compete level, he is just a monster when he hits people, and he's getting an opportunity to play first line minutes with Canada where he wouldn't on a normal team like this. I'm going to say rising a bit.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that one too. This guy hits people to hurt people, I feel like. Cole Reshny of Team Canada, coming off of a 2-goal game in the quarterfinal. How do we feel about Cole Reshny, a late arrival to this tournament?
Given Scott Wheeler exactly what he asked for there in that overtime winner. I'm going to say a push. Just because Reshny is red hot coming in. The stock was already climbing. Hard to climb too much more than it already has for a player like him. I'm going to say a push.
Yeah, I like that answer. I think that's fair. And then to have the 2 goals that he did yesterday, including the overtime game winner, I think that was just a continuation of what is happening with Cole Reshny right now. Another highly skilled Canadian, Ben Kindle.
Push. He hasn't wowed, but he's been good, and he is what he is, I'd say.
How about Canada's captain, Braden Coots?
I'm going to say a push on him. I'm going to say a push too. Looked great to open the tournament, and then he's just been kind of okay the rest of the time.
Yeah, that's the thing that can happen at this thing. I think there's a lot of guys that'll just kind of, they have a hot start, then things change a little bit. Maybe their role changes a little bit. I like the player. I think that he does a lot of different things well. I think he is, a clear first-round candidate and everything else. But I feel that one as well a little bit there with the push on that one. All right, let's go head away from Canada for a second here. Go back to Sweden. How about Sasha Boumediene, who we just talked about a little bit ago?
Well, you gotta say that it's rising, but you mentioned earlier that he's been good, but he hasn't been excellent. Well, and he wouldn't be putting up this amount of points on a normal team because he wouldn't be getting the amount of minutes. Like, they don't have another defenseman who can move the puck whatsoever, right? They do the 5 forwards on the second unit. He's getting so many puck touches just by default, but he's a ton of points, so it's not hurting his stock, that's for sure. I'm going to give it a rise, but I think everybody here recognizes that he's getting lots of points, but he's maybe not actually improving on his projection long term.
Yeah, I would say it is a cautious rising because I think some of the complaints about him coming into the tournament have not been satisfied, in that there are questions about his decision making, some of the reads that he's made, some of his execution. The skating is so high end, but yeah, I'd say that's a fair one to say. He is rising, but I think I would say I'd pump the brakes a little bit on saying like stock soaring or anything like that. I think that he's done what he's needed to do here. He's continued on an upward trend over the course of the season, so that's good too. But obviously, there's still more work to be done for him. All right. One of the polarizing goalies of this class is Team Canada's goalie. That's Jack Ivankovic. What do we got for him? Rising, falling, or push?
Did the barbecue give him a couple inches? Did it boost him up to 6'1" or 2? Because he's not rising. He's not rising in any other way than that. He's won everything internationally. We know who he is. He can't. His stock. There was no way it was going anywhere but staying flat at this tournament. So he's a push.
Yeah, I am with you on that one. I think it's just going to be there's going to be a team that takes him. I do think that.
Yep.
I do think somebody will take him, but yes, it's going to be awfully late. All right, let's keep the theme going with the undersized, but this one is a guy who is leading Team USA in scoring. He is LJ Mooney. How do we feel about LJ Mooney? Rising, falling, or push?
Love Little John. He is rising. Hey, he is playing his heart out there. He's banging, he's crashing, he's setting up plays. He's undersized and he's got a long, long road ahead. But I think the spirited effort, especially because he struggled early on in the season, is good news for him. I'm going to say rising to the point where there was a world where he wasn't going to be a pick. He still might not be, but I think he's going to be a pick maybe because of this tournament.
I'm with you. I think he's rising for sure, and I think that he is going to be a pick. The question is where, and I think that there's, I think anywhere from 4th to 7th wouldn't shock me at this point. A team would have to love him, I think, to take him in the 4th. And it seems crazy to say that about, you'd have to love a guy that you're going to pick in the 4th. But that's the thing. When you're 5'7", that's the nature of the game. You're the likelihood of you playing more than a few hundred games in the NHL, which would be amazing for anybody. But the likelihood of you being a long-term NHLer is pretty low. But I will say this tournament has proven that LJ Mooney is a gamer. He might be small, but he does not hang out on the perimeter. He gets into the fight. He goes to the hard areas. He lays the body, he throws the body around. At 5'7", he knocked out Radim Murka in the first game. He's taking out Ivar Stenberg. Like, he was doing all this stuff. Even
Anton Frundell ate one from him.
Yeah. So he is not perimeter at all, and I like him a lot. So I think, for me, LJ Mooney is a pick. Would it be before the 4th round? I don't think so. But at the same time, if you're 5'7" and you get drafted in the NHL, it means that you've done something pretty special. I think that that'll be the case for him. Let's keep it with that theme, though. And I'm going to go with Cameron Schmidt of Team Canada. Undersized, superstar scorer. How have we felt about him here at the Under-18 World Championship?
I don't love cam on cam crime here, right? We got to stick together. But I'm going to say falling. I'm going to say falling now, maybe more in the public sphere than anything else, because I think teams have a very good beat on this kid. And, I've been on an island at EP on my feelings about where we've had him on the list for realistic upside. But he's an excellent skater and he can flash. And I had this argument with somebody there a few days ago. I was like, he flashed 3 or 4 times and he looked excellent, but the rest of the time he was invisible. And you want to do that in the NHL? If he gets to the NHL and he can do that and he can flash 3 or 4 times and end up with a goal and 2 assists and then be invisible the rest of the time, I got a contract for him. If he's going to do that against Slovakia at the U18s when he's supposed to be a stud, that gives me pause. That gives me more concern. I'm going to say falling.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I expected a bit more. I think that we've seen him play better throughout the year. It's one of those things where will this tournament significantly impact his draft stock? No, but I think it's going to confirm some suspicions the teams had already had about him. When you're within your own age group, regardless of whether you've played with the team or not, you need to show out. His role continues to diminish a bit, and that's not going to help him very much. All right, one more for the little guys, and this one is Adam Banak of Team Czechia.
Yeah, I like this kid too. He gave me a great quote at Holinka back in August. He seems like a really spirited and competitive player. I'm gonna say push. I'm gonna say push, even though he's been popping points. He does that internationally very well. But again, he just is what he is, and we know that, and everybody knows that. And again, he's a pick. He's a late round pick, but he's a long way from getting to the NHL.
Yeah, I feel that same way too. I think the brain is high end. I think he makes a lot of good decisions, but just again, it comes down to physiology for some of these guys. And he's a
Yeah.
he's a really good skater. Is he as good a skater as LJ Mooney? I don't think so. I think
Or
that's
Schmidt.
does he or Schmidt, does he compete as hard? Those kinds of things. Those are going to be the questions for him. And hey, Czechs pushed Canada pretty well in that quarterfinal. Banach was involved in that, but probably needed to be a little bit more. I think a push is a very fair assessment of that one. All right, I want to go back to the blue line, and I want to give you Blake Fiddler, the Frisco kid, local boy, makes good with Team USA, played with the Edmonton Oil Kings throughout the season. What do you got for me on Blake Fiddler, defenseman?
It's an easy push. Easy push. Hasn't really stood out too much. He's been fine. He has tremendous stopping potential at the NHL level and somewhat limited offensively, and that's basically what he's done at this tournament too.
Yeah, I feel like this tournament has been an indication of his season, so I'm going to go with push as well. And it's an interesting one for him because he has come in and he's basically become USA's number one defenseman and has played that role pretty well for them. But that may end up being a little bit more of an indictment on their current blue line than how he has played here. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's still I think he's one of those guys where I think in a lot of drafts, he's not a first round prospect. I think he'd get consideration, but in this draft, I just think he's going to end up being there. Yeah. But anyway, we move on. I'm going to throw you a curveball here, but I actually probably already know what your answer is on this one because we've talked about him, and that is Nilsson from our pal Eric Nilsson from Sweden.
Well, I mean, he wasn't at his best in the quarters, but he has had a tremendous tournament. I'm yes, rising. Best views of the year on him at this tournament.
Yeah, I think he does a little bit of everything. So I have him as a rising as well. I think there's a lot to like about the way that he plays. I think there's some hardness to him. I think that he is able to,
Yeah.
make a few plays there, and I think he's a guy that we're going to be seeing a lot more of here in the near future. So very intrigued by him. Here's a player that I think is kind of similar, and that is Cole McKinney of Team USA. What do you got for him? Rising, falling, or push on Cole McKinney, Michigan commit?
I'm gonna say push. I've said it. I've been saying it for a while. He's the only kid on the program that I feel comfortable, maybe feel comfortable taking in the first round. Not even to say he's an A grade prospect, but taking in the first round this year, maybe a B plus for him. And I think he's been a B plus at this tournament. I think he's been good. I think he is what he is. He hasn't really shown me anything that I didn't already know.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Cole McKinney is a guy who does a lot of things exceptionally well.
Across
He
the
doesn't
board.
do,
Yeah.
there's nothing really exceptional about him in the end. He is one of those guys that just, he's a Swiss Army knife. I think he can fit him in a lot of places. I think he can make an impact that way. Let's stick with the Americans and let's go with Cullen Potter, the speedster. We were singing his praises last week. What do we have for Cullen Potter? Rising, falling, push. What do you got, Cam?
I'm going to give him a little bump. I think he's been good. I think he is so dynamic with those feet. And we saw him running wild at ASU this year. They let him, they took the harness off and said, go do your thing. And he did, and he had some success. And now at this level, he can do a little more, he has a little more space, a little more creativity. Finishing, he was a little snake bitten earlier, could have had 4 or 5 goals. And then, now he's broken through now. I'm going to give a little bump. I think he's a first rounder.
I think he is too. It's a push for me because I feel like there's been one thing about Cullen throughout this entire season. Love the skating. Think that there's a chance for him to be a creative player. I think that there's a real chance for him to be a producer in the NHL. My one concern is that there is so many times where he is making things happen and the play kind of ends up fizzling out. Either he skates himself into a little bit of trouble, and this could also be the result of people alongside him is he tries to make a play and it's just not getting finished. But there are certainly some execution things from him. But again, when you have an elite tool like the skating ability that he does, that is a separating factor. All right, we're getting to the very end here, and I'm going to end on a bit of a wild card because this is another American player, and I feel like he's, this is a guy that made a shift the middle of the season that we almost never see, in that he chose to go from the NTDP to college early at the winter or the spring semester, essentially. And that is Will Horov, the big man. Rising, falling, or push?
He's interesting because he left the program and then did better. Another potential indictment on this year's national team development program. So he was already rising a little bit, probably a significant amount through the back half of the season. So I'm going to say it's a push. I'm going to say he hasn't been great. He's been okay at the net front. He's such a big body, 4 checks, but I haven't seen a ton of skill out of him. Stockselius is a similar player, and I think is better. I think he has better handles. I think he has higher upside to create and also have jam in his game. I think Eddie Genborg has probably been better than Will Horov. You know what? I'm changing my answer. I'm saying it's a slight fall for Will Horov. I talked myself into this.
you backed into that one. You're just like, but that's honestly though, and that's actually, I'm glad that happened, because it's kind of when we're in our process and we're talking things out, like obviously on the podcast, a lot of it more, and then this was designed to be more top of mind, right? Like, what's the first thing you think of? I didn't even, you didn't even look at the list that I made before this. So that gave me a bit of an advantage in these conversations. But when you say the thing about Will Horov is that these are the conversations that we have internally when we're talking about a player. Yes. It's like, and I'll tell you what, for me, he is slightly rising, not solely based on this tournament. I think it's also a combination of his second half, but it's also what I'm hearing too. That's the thing, is that there is the scouts, I think, have been more impressed with him in the second half than they were in the first half. And I think that, definitely, his decision to go to Michigan ultimately was a good one for him personally. It's not going to work for every player. I certainly wouldn't recommend it. Most players who leave the program early, with the exception of guys like Werenski and Hanifin, who accelerated their schooling to go to college a full year early, a lot of them don't pan out. Like they don't, they leave early. It's kind of interesting. And so you always wonder, those decisions that those players make. But Will Horov made a decision for himself and ended up working out for him. And it seems like scouts are very much enamored with the big man, who also has tremendous NHL bloodlines. Of course, the son of Sean Horov, who played so many years in the NHL and is now part of the Detroit Red Wings staff. All right, Cam, that's the rapid fire. I feel like we've rapidly fired enough. I do want to circle back. Let's talk about the top two, the first 3 guys we talked about. That's Anton Frundell, Radim Murtka, and Jackson Smith. I'm going to start with the 2 defensemen. We'll finish off with Frundell. Murtka and Jackson are 2 guys that have size. They have mobility. Yes. They have a certain, there's some touch there. There's the ability to make plays. So Murtka, I don't really have much concern about his hockey sense as much as I do with Jackson Smith. I feel like Jackson Smith's reads and his kind of his connecting with teammates, with decisions. Those are the things I'm a little bit concerned about. Murtka, to me, it comes down to compete, heaviness, hardness. At his size, it's one of those things. Like, I think the upside is phenomenal for both players because of the athletic toolkits that both possess. But, Murtka, I feel like he, we kind of said falling. I feel like it's kind of a push, because who's really ultimately going to hop over him? But these are 2 guys that we're talking about that are in contention to be the second defenseman off the board after Matthew Schaefer. And based on what we've seen here, it's harder to make that argument, is it not?
Yeah. Do either of those guys look like top 10 picks, right? Would you feel good about taking either of those guys at this point? And I've been on the Jackson Smith train, but I just mean even looking back to last year, Zane Parekh went 9, Sam Dickinson went 10, Z Bouillon went 12. those guys would be going 1, 2, 3 or 2, 3, 4 right now in this year, right? Like it's just the quality is such a different level. And so I'm with you. I've been underwhelmed with Jackson Smith throughout the year. He has flashed some really incredible and creative like skating patterns with handles where he's beaten guys, and he's made a couple of plays. He's got a few points. Some of his goals have been a little lucky, probably very lucky. And then Murtka, I just like sometimes he snaps a pass where I'm like, whew, that's a 10-year NHL veteran who just snapped that outlet pass. And then other times he's 4 feet away, he's putting in his skates, he's missing passing options. Defensively, he's got the good stick and a good body. And yes, they're both big and they're mobile. And so you can work with that, right? A team can get them and they can be like, we can build this into a number 3 or a number 4, without too much trouble, hopefully, because the brains aren't too bad. But yeah, no, it's, and then with Frundell, these are 3 guys that are, very likely to be top 10 picks. It sure doesn't feel like there's any top 10 picks in this tournament, except for 26. We got a couple good ones in 26.
Yeah, we're gonna get to them next. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and I think for me, I've obviously been a bit higher on Frundell throughout the year. I don't think that we've seen him open it up at all in this tournament yet. He did arrive late, like we said. We gave him the grace of the first game. They get a full day off. He kind of gets his bearings. Doesn't play necessarily. Had a couple of points in their last preliminary round game. Kind of was a little bit substandard, I think, to his standard in the game against Finland. And in the end, he's still got a chance to be a really high pick. So he's one of those guys where this tournament is a tough read. But I know you've had a hard time getting a good viewing of him, period, this year. But yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be really interesting. But that the lack of consensus, I feel like, and really, there's no guarantee. Like, we'll see who gets the number 1 pick on Monday night. There's no guarantee that Schaefer is going 1. I mean, he's been injured for most of the year. There's risk associated with any pick like that. That you have to really think long and hard about it. But the fact that he was injured and there's been not really a push from, I mean, Misa had a push, but outside of that,
he's pushed. Yeah.
It hasn't like the fact that there's still at least a somewhat general consensus that Schaefer is the number 1 prospect, I think, is another thing where it's just like, man, what is going on with this draft class? So we got that. So let's calm our senses for a second. Let's take a break from 2025. Because that's all we're going to talk about that so much in these coming weeks. Everybody, if you are a fan of this podcast and you want to know our draft takes, they are coming. We're going to have, obviously next week we might have to do a little mock draft with our draft lottery for the draft lottery teams next week. I think we might have to sprinkle a little one of those in there, Cam. I think it's a little sneak peek, how's she going there? But let's talk 2026 real quick, because that is, to me, where one of the biggest stories of this tournament is. And we're going to start with Ivar Stenberg. He has been outstanding for Sweden. He's had a couple games where he's been quieter, but you look at the players and you look at up and down this tournament and you say, who here is the best NHL prospect I'm seeing? And he is right in that conversation, if not at the very top of the list. Where does he fall for you, and what have you seen that makes you feel that way?
Ivar Stenberg. They're going to be chanting it in Gothenburg soon enough. Ivar Stenberg. He's the real deal, man. You got it right there on the show notes. Ivar Stenberg is the real deal. He is the best player here for my money. Like, yes, he's the best prospect long term. I think he's the best player here. The things that he's doing on the ice, nobody else is doing. Nobody's pulling off the moves that he's pulling off and the shot that he has. And he is very, very good. I really like Ivar Stenberg, and I really liked him going back to Hlinka. We've been seeing him in the J20 torching it and getting up in the SHL and finding his rhythm down there. Selfishly, I do wish that he did end up coming to BU, but it will be fun to hear them chanting his name there with Frölunda. He's good. He's not good enough to push Gav. He's not going to push him for 1, but this kid looks like he's going to be the 2 pick next year. Unless a couple of these D-men we might be talking about next, unless some of them really go off, I do think we're looking at the number 2 pick next year.
Well, let's let's pause on that for 1 minute, because yes, I do think that we there is a defenseman that I want to talk about after this spectacular game that he had for Canada yesterday. But want to stick
Mm-hmm.
with Stenberg for just a minute, because what we've seen at this tournament, like there have not been many players in this tournament where you say this guy can take over a shift.
Yeah.
Stenberg has done it a couple of times. He has made plays that a lot of other guys in this tournament can't make. He's making plays at speed. He's engaging physically. He is finding ways to get to the interior. I am really growing to like this player, and you and I both talked about it last week. When he was in this SHL playoffs, he looked like a man. Like physically he did not, but he played like a pro.
Strength.
Was reading
Yeah.
plays at such a high level, and it's almost like here he's kind of got to take a step back. You almost have to slow it down a little bit at this level. So I think we've seen that to a certain degree as well. But he's an exceptional player. He's a guy that I'm really looking forward to seeing longer term. And gosh, the amount of pro run he's going to get next year with Frölunda is going to really make a strong case for him, right? It's going to make him a really good player. But to get to the point that you were just making, the defense for next year looks interesting, and I want to start that with Keaton Verhoff, who set up the game-winning goal for Canada in overtime against Czechia in the quarterfinal. He led Canada in ice time in that game as well. This is a young guy who scored a bunch of goals in the WHL this year. He is a really, really intriguing, interesting player that, with the skating, with the skill, with the offensive know-how, and with the ability to defend and the size on top of it, I mean, we're talking about a pretty special prospect here, aren't we?
I really like Keaton Verhoff coming in late, right? Him and Reshny came over when the Royals were knocked out. Looked, he looked bad in the first game. He looked like he didn't have his timing. He was struggling under pressure. I was like, oh my goodness, like this doesn't look like the Keaton Verhoff I'd seen this year. And here we are. And the coaching staff stuck with him, right? Like they could have just pulled him right out of the lineup. They got enough D. They could have made some changes, but instead they stuck with him. And there he was, starting overtime for the Canadians as the first D over the bench. Okay. He had the breakaway. I thought it was lights out right then and there too. But then instead he wanted to set up his buddy Cole Reshny. The boots aren't great. I don't think the skating is elite. Now, if he added some more quickness, some more fluidity, a little more lateral agility across that line, started looking a little bit like our boy there, Xavier, pardon me. I think that could push him right into the mix of going to next year. But he doesn't have that just yet. But you're absolutely right. He's come, if we're talking about stock rising, like he is from the start of the tournament to now, like he has tripled his value in the last 3 weeks, or the last 3 games, I should say. Sorry. So no, I think he's a very, very interesting prospect with the size, with the goal scoring ability. He makes a good outlet pass. I think he's got a good head on his shoulders. I think he's going to be a top 5 pick in all likelihood here. It's just a matter of can the feet get up there enough to really push and go for like number 2.
Yeah, the stride is a little heavier. Like, I think that's true.
Yeah.
However, he showed a bit of a second gear, especially in that overtime winner, where he kind of stutter steps and just zooms in and has a great pass to Reshny for the game-winning goal. It's like, wow, that was one of the moments where I was like, okay, there might be a little bit more there on the feet side. Mm-hmm. But you mentioned that this Canadian team was heavy on 2026 draft eligible guys. You mentioned Xavier Villeneuve, who was over a point per game defenseman in the QMJHL this year. Incredible. Carson Carrolls was the second most utilized defenseman in that overtime game out of Prince George. He had a really strong season, but boy, has he looked good in his next couple of games here. He played almost 21 minutes in that game, as even got more shifts in the overtime period than Jackson Smith. I'm not even sure if Jackson Smith touched the ice in OT yesterday. And so, that's a really intriguing thing. But yeah, Villeneuve has shown this incredible puck moving ability, and he looks like that next wave of these undersized, heavily skilled defensemen that can move pucks and make plays. Ryan Lynn had a couple of massive blocks in that game. So we've seen some really good players for 2026 next year. We don't have our Gavin McKenna. Porter Martone was outstanding last year. James Hagen's obviously set a
Ryan
record.
Rubrick's not doing it.
Yeah, that's true, and I didn't mention it, but yeah, Ryan Rubrick not as visible as these other guys, because there's a lot of 2026 guys we could talk about. Adam Novotny, another one, really liked him for Czechia. Nicholas Aram Olsen, who we mentioned earlier from Norway, 4 points in the relegation game, saves his team from going down. So there is a lot to look forward to for next year's draft, especially though, as we look at the D-core for this year in 2025, we look at the D-core for next year, we look at the D-core from a year ago, are saying, okay, based on what we're seeing so far, there might be a few more of those guys in next year's class. So 26 is going to be interesting. By the way, the 2026 Under-18 Worlds heading to Slovakia. And then 2027, it's coming back to the United States. City's not finalized for either, but just if you're planning your schedule, 2027 in the U.S. Would be a good chance, unless you really want to go to Slovakia, in which case I highly encourage that as well. All right, Cam, let's get to our Beyond Belief segment, because we're going to bring it back to the 2025 draft. We're also going to have a 2026 draft question in there. So just to break it up so that we don't have to talk about 2025 as much, because you know how I feel about this draft class. But anyway, I'm going to kick us off here. So for those that are new to the show, Beyond Belief is where we each read off a statement to each other, and the other will decide whether it's beyond belief or believable. And so let's see how this one strikes your fancy. I think I know where you're going with it, and I think it's going to be fun for some discussion here. Hard-hitting Canadian forward Brady Martin is a top 10 pick in 2025.
Beyond belief. Beyond belief, I say, good sir. I mean, it isn't. It could definitely happen, but I don't think it will. I think he will be in and around that zone. Maybe let's say 12, 14, maybe 15. But I do think he's going to be a fan favorite. Does he have a little Sam Bennett in him? He might have a little Sam Bennett in him. You know what I mean? He might be one of these guys. He hits so hard. I put the tweet out there where I said mechanically he's the best hitter that I've seen at this level. And that's not like the hardest hitter. He's not 6'5", 230 pounds and literally killing people on the ice, but he hits them so hard and he doesn't chase them so much. Like he just knows where to go. Like this one forechecking play where he was right on the guy's heels, and then the guy went to go collect the puck around the net, and he forced him to go that way already, and then he quickly cut around the front of it and timed it and just annihilated him. Like it was like, and the boards crashing. So, and then that scout said that he'd be one of the best hitters in the NHL right now. So you don't draft a guy in the top 10 just because he can hit. He has like one of the best mixtapes of the year this year. Like he's got skill. He's got loads of skill too. But I do think he's more suited for like a second line role. And in this draft, that's just fine, especially when you're getting all those hits and that he's a good kid too, right? He's got good moral standing. But yes, I'm going to say he's just outside the 10.
All right. So I'm going to say it's believable that he's going to go in the top 10. And I mean, you alluded to it, that there's certainly a chance that he could go in there. I'd say in years like this, where there's such a lack of consensus and the amount of fans that he's generated over this year, I think that there's a real chance that he could sneak in. It would be sneaking in. I don't think it's 100% gonna go that way, but to me, it's at least believable because of the way that he has played throughout this season. 33 goals. He's got 9 points in this tournament here. He's been, the body checking is a factor. The physical strength is a factor. There's power elements to him. The way he closes on pucks, he hits to separate, and he hits to hurt sometimes too. I mean, I think that resonates, is that, hey, he's coming at you with everything he's got, and you are going to know that he is there. The compete level for him is off the charts, and that is really where I think teams are going to just say, okay, we need a guy like this. We think he's going to help us in the hardest time of the year, and he still has enough skill to me to where he can maybe make that difference. But do I feel confident in saying that's believable? Not really. I'm not saying that he's for sure going. I'm just saying that it wouldn't shock me anymore, based on what we know of this class and how we know how scouts feel about him. So let us move on, and I turn it over to you, my friend.
Keaton Verhoff will be the first defenseman taken in 2026. First off the board.
Yeah, so this one will obviously take a while to play out. But I think when you look at the size, when you look at the offensive capabilities, when you look that he can be responsible defensively, I think yes. I think that this is the guy that to me has the package that lends itself to being a top defenseman in a draft class. I think that the scoring, the way that he scored this season, the way that he can move. I know I think you're probably a bit more concerned about the skating than I am, but at this point, I still don't have a huge book on Verhoff. But from what I've seen so far this season, I really like what I'm seeing, and obviously it's a long way out. We can see, James Higgins was the number one pick going into this draft year. This year, that's not the case anymore. But think about Matthew Schaefer, how good he was at this last year, and if Verhoff continues on the trend line that he's on, as you mentioned, didn't have that great game, but if he's on the trend line that he's on with how he's played in the last couple, and let's say this team wins a gold medal, all of a sudden we're going to be having similar conversations about Keaton Verhoff that we were having about Matt Schaefer. Just the skating differential is certainly the separator for Schaefer at this point.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I gave Schaefer a vote for top D last year at that event. Like he was so good. But I mean, at the end of the day, like Verhoff might get that vote. Like if we're voting today, he might be the guy getting a vote for it too, right? We picked two. He's probably been one of the top two, especially if he has another good game here in the next two. Yes, you're right. He is 6'4". He's a right shot defenseman who scores goals. But does he have a little Carter Yakimchuk in him? Is he gonna be Carter Yakimchuk? Or is he going to be, maybe does he have a higher potential than that? So that's where I guess is where I'm going to end up with him. I'm going to say he's going to be the first off the board, though. I am going to agree with you on that he will be the first, even though I do think like Ryan Lynn, the kid's got brains for days. He's mobile. Xavier, I talked to him after the game and I just like teed it up for him. Who do you model your game after? Any guesses? Montreal kid, Lane Hudson. He wants. I was like, it's easy. It's easy, right? Like, and he plays like Lane Hudson. Like he looks like Lane Hudson out there. He's got the shiftiness and the lateral agility and all that good stuff too. So there's going to be competitors. You already mentioned, Carroll's too, right? Those are the big four next year. But I will say the 6'4" right shot kid is probably the layup to go first.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement there. All right, let's stick with the defensive theme here. It's going to be interesting watching this all unfold, because I think that the U.S. team might have a couple of more guys after the second half that have a chance to sneak into the first round. But my question to you is, off of the under-18 roster here at the World Championship in Frisco, Blake Fiddler will be the first player taken off this USA roster at the 2025 NHL Draft.
Yeah, that seems believable to me. Again, he's a 6'4" right shot defenseman, right? Like they just don't grow on trees, and he's pretty mobile. And again, he has just huge stopping potential. So it's like if I'm sitting there and I'm like, am I going to take Colin Potter, who I'm hoping is going to be like an energy guy on the third line, probably maybe a second liner if things break out right for him? Am I going to take Will Horov, who's probably going to be a bottom six guy, or am I going to take a swing that I'm going to get like really stalwart defensive right shot 6'4" defenseman who can move a little bit, who can play on my second pair? Yeah, it's Blake Fiddler for me.
Yeah, I would say that his profile projects most favorably to the NHL. I do think that there might be a couple more of these Americans that come off the board earlier than we expect. But again, I think when you look at tools and physical attributes, I think Blake Fiddler is probably the guy that is most likely to make that happen.
Yeah. Okay, last one here. The great state of Texas will get the U18s as the permanent U.S. host city every other year. They're going to come back to the States here every second year. Are they going to just keep it here in Frisco and Allen? Are we just going to run it back?
Well, we've been here twice, right? So we've been here twice. There was the first post-COVID year. if you were a Dallas Stars fan and you didn't come to that tournament, you missed Wyatt Johnston and Logan Stankoven on the same roster. That was a pretty incredible tournament overall. Obviously, Logan Stankoven, now member of the Carolina Hurricanes, but Wyatt Johnston, who was not amazing in this tournament, the only hockey he played all that year. But I'm beating around the bush, and I'm going to say it's beyond belief. We do know that USA is going to host this event 2 more times in the next 4 years. I think that one of the options is to return to Texas. It's not out of the question, but I do think that this is an opportunity that USA may use to test other markets as well. So I think that there are a number of places in the United States with multi-rink situations in NHL cities. Part of the reason that the event is back in Texas now and will come back to the US in 2 years is, the NHL had a lot of pull in that and saying, our teams are constantly going over, spending a lot of money, sending a lot of guys over to Europe. Basically USA is only getting it like every 6th year. How do we make it so that it's a little bit easier, because this is one of the most important scouting events that there is. I think they'll spread it around. I think Plymouth is an option. USA Hockey Arena, they're going to be doing some renovating there. I think that's going to be an option for them. You think about other markets too that could potentially float in there. One of the places that has had a ton of events is Buffalo. Another is St. Louis. There are all these different places that could potentially be the place.
Vegas.
All I know is that there's a lot of different. Yeah, there's a lot of places that we could be. But if you and I got to vote, Cam, Frisco's pretty darn good. It's not bad. Like, it is a great place. The facilities are great. The area is great. The barbecue is great. So it's pretty not bad if this ends up being the spot.
Yeah, we could do worse. We could definitely do worse. I mean, the tornado warning yesterday and the flash floods, not ideal, but we were fine. It's been warm. It's warm. It's central. The barbecue's delicious, right? And like you said, we're 20 minutes between rinks. Next time we'll stay at Pronman's Hotel there. We'll get all the Royal Palace stuff too, right? Where all the NHL teams are staying too. And I'd be just fine with that. But yeah, if they want to toss one down Florida's way, they want to throw one in Vegas or just keep it warm, right? Let's just keep it. Maybe chuck us a World Juniors in a warm spot too.
Yeah, shout out warm weather world. I'm team warm weather World Juniors. I'm team warm weather. This being down here in Texas, and we've gotten great weather outside of the tornado warnings. But yeah, I mean it's been a great host, and I do want to give those folks credit. I know that some's been made about the ticket sales, and yes, the attendance has been actually poorer for this tournament, I feel like, than it was for the post-COVID tournament as well, and that is something that there is part of that. But you also have to remember the Dallas Stars are in the Stanley Cup playoffs right now. I think that there's a bit of a focus shift there. We didn't have much of that going on down this way last time around, but I will say there's a lot to like about it. I want to give a huge credit to everybody that's been involved with this tournament. The setup has been really solid. And, you talking to the NHL scouts, I think they're very happy with it for the most part as well. We'll see if it ends up sticking around. But that one, shout out to the great state of Texas for their hospitality while we've been here. I'm looking forward to going home, but it is going to be hard to leave some of the great stuff that we've had here. So, so plenty to get to there. All right. So we like to close out every show with an either or selection. However, I wanted to make it a threefer, Cam, because you have to pick one of these players.
Ménage à trois.
A ménage à trois. But the reason I'm doing this, we talked about all three of these guys before. This is a very interesting draft in where some of the top players are significantly undersized in terms of, guys, they're not necessarily the top prospects, but if you look at who's playing some of the best hockey, some of these guys have to be in that conversation. And so you have to pick one undersized offensive dynamo. Is it going to be LJ Mooney? Is it going to be Cameron Schmidt? Or is it going to be Adam Bennock? Who you got, Cam?
Cameron Schmidt has the best name and the most skill. But if I'm picking a person to bring into my organization that I'm going to let sit in college for 3 or 4 years and really marinate and develop, and then come in and have that compete level, I'm going LJ. Give me LJ Mooney. But of course, if I'm drafting, I'm probably going to take the higher skill player. But I'm taking LJ for this exercise right here. I'm gonna take Mooney because I think that kid's got that dog in him, and that's what I want in a little guy to beat the odds. He's got to be able to just be sycophant and push that rock up that hill over and over again until one day it sticks.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the reason I bring this up is because if we had this conversation, let's say 3 or 4 months ago, would
Cameron Schmidt.
it probably wouldn't go that way, right? Like,
No,
it probably wouldn't go that way.
Yeah.
So
absolutely not.
And the thing is, so like, one thing I want, the reason that I put this as our topic is, for one, I also wanted to talk a little bit about like all of these players. Like Benok, we've been talking about him for years because he was he's the all-time leading scorer at the Hlinka Gretzky Cup. He always seems to show up in those big moments. Czechs have been more competitive with him on their roster
because of him.
They don't bring him to World Juniors this year. You know, that he has an okay year in the USHL. You know, Cameron Schmidt had a pretty good year in the WHL, but had goals. Some of those. And then Mooney was hurt at the beginning of the season. And the thing is, so he's 5'7". He's light. He did get injured in a body check in one of the games against the college players, and that's a reminder to NHL teams are like, you got to worry about these guys and their stability and things like that. But then we come here to the under-18 Worlds, and LJ Mooney has, I feel like, flipped the script on the conversation because he is a competitor. He has high character. He's incredibly intelligent. And this is a kid who was, for years, talked about as the top player in this birth year. Everyone said, follow that up with, I just hope he grows. And he hasn't really, right? And this might be where he tops out at. But for the reason that you said, Cam, he's got that dog in him. He is not a perimeter player. He does not shy away. That gets harder as you get up into the other levels. But I think he's going to enter college hockey at the University of Minnesota. I think he's going to be a really strong player for them. And people are going to ultimately love this player. He is going to, like you think about guys like Brian Giunta and others. Is he going to have that level of career? It's hard to say. But I do think that this player has some real ability. And even if he grows an inch or two, that's great. I don't think it's going to happen, but it'd be great. And all of a sudden that changes things. There are more 5'8" guys that have had 600-700 games in the NHL than there are 5'7" guys. It's just the way the math works out. But size matters to a certain extent. But with LJ Mooney, we'll see how much it matters. So anyway, Cam, tell us what's coming up. We got the draft lottery on the way here. What's coming up on Elite Prospects as we get geared up as the draft season really ramps up here?
I feel like this was a good chat. I wish we were doing it together at maybe Sidecar Social or something. Well, we should have posted it up in Sidecar Social. That would have been later tonight. We could record another one.
Let's do it.
So, right? That sounds pretty good. After a couple meals. So I dropped that Wielander piece there. That was great to get that while in Texas. Got the exclusive interview with him. So if you haven't read that, talking about Tommy Wielander and his contract dispute with the Canucks are always the main character and not usually in a good way. Had the Vigo Bjork piece come out, and I've got Anton Frundell scheduled to come out tomorrow morning. We're getting in. Draft season is coming. Film rooms are starting to click out at EP2, right? Justin Carbonneau, Hattie just had a good one out on him. So we're going to be rolling those features out. Draft Guide is in full swing production-wise. We're plugging in hundreds of reports right now. Loads and loads of good stuff at EP. So this is our time to shine, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is what it's all about, my friend. And yeah, over on FloHockey, make sure you get that subscription because the Calder Cup playoffs have kicked up into high gear. Some great games already throughout the first 2 rounds. A lot of action coming up this weekend. As we've mentioned a few times on this podcast, it is loaded with top NHL prospects. A number of recent first-round draft picks have been added to their respective teams. So make sure you get to that. We also want to make sure, if you go over to FloHockey.tv, make sure to check out our original feature, Chocolate Dynasty, on the Hershey Bears. If you don't know the Hershey Bears story and the fact that they are one of the best dynasties in college, in all of professional hockey, then you need to see that. It gives you a little insight into their history as they go for 3 straight Calder Cups this year. It hasn't been done since 60 to 62 by the Springfield Indians way back when. So crazy stuff happening there in Hershey, and we tell that story there. A lot more coming on that front. Also, get to know Todd Nelson. There's a lot of NHL job openings right now, and Todd Nelson has been a proven winner at the AHL level and does have NHL coaching experience. So keep an eye out for him on these as these openings go. But lots of that. So make sure you get over to FloHockey for that. We'll have draft stuff throughout, World Under-18 coverage, including recaps of the medal games and everything like that. So lots more to come. Cam, it is it's all happening right now. Make sure you check out everything after the draft lottery. I know both of us will be active in getting content out. And then next week, when we return on Called Up, I don't know, Cam, we didn't really talk about it before, but I mean, a mock draft of the lottery team sounds kind of good to me. I don't know how it sounds to you. I mean, maybe we go back and forth.
We've done some mocks in our day.
I think that's what we're doing. So come back next week for a mock draft right here. Our very first Called Up the Prospects podcast mock draft will be next week. We will have that for you. It is. It's very hard. But also, huge thanks to Ever for producing today. Big thanks to Wonderful Pistachios, our presenting sponsor. Just remember, pistachios are known for their protein, power, fiber, and better for you unsaturated fats. For a combination that may help keep you feeling fuller longer, go read Elite Prospects. Go read FloHockey.tv. Come back and make sure you're watching this podcast every single week. Download us. Leave us a kind rating and review. Leave us comments on Spotify. Do whatever you like. We're always happy to hear from you. But Cam, I guess let's do this again sometime next week, and I'll see you later today. So I don't know what we're even. Yeah, maybe we'll just record it and share it with our listeners for next time. So yeah. But for Cam, yeah. For Cam Robinson, I'm Chris Peters. This is Called Up the Prospects podcast presented by Wonderful Pistachios. We will see you next week.